Yeah.
Welcome to the Neighborhood Radio. It's your host, Ricky
Thank you.
Zugly, with Zeke, doing an extra interview with Black Bear. Welcome. Thank you for being.
Thank you.
How's your night been so far?
It's been pretty good. It's 9:20 p.m. here, so I just put my 6-year-old son to bed and just cleaned up after making spaghetti bolognese and doing
Yum.
all the dad things and yeah, today I was working on writing, working on some new songs. It's been a good day.
Awesome. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very keen for some more new music. I noticed when I was on your Spotify, I noticed said a new album was meant to be coming in 2023. Is that still
That's still the
happening?
plan. The,
Yeah.
yeah, the clock is
Yeah.
ticking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is when you self-release, it is, I'm getting the songs mastered as I go. So I have
hmm
more than half of the songs mixed and mastered, and all of them are done. It's just a question of finalizing them. And so I do still have it in my mind that I can get it out before the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, we've still got
Yeah.
a month and a half to go. Still plenty of
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So
What do you do for work?
yeah. How many? Oh,
Sorry.
What was that, Rick?
I was just asking, what do you do for work?
So I was for 10 years I was a creative writing professor at NYU. and then
Oh,
uh, and then our son was born, and we lived in New York for another 2.5 years, and then we came here to Germany, and my wife and I did a sort of swap where I had been the primary breadwinner and she'd been the primary caregiver for our son for those first couple years, and then she got a job at the Munich International School here teaching English, and so I said, okay, we're gonna do a thing, or we said we're going to do a thing where I get back to making music and I get back to working full time on writing while also being the primary parent and doing all the home stuff. And that's the period that I'm still in. So my job is to be creative and to be a parent,
that's awesome. Because I was gonna
that's
which is
ask, like,
pretty
how do you
sweet.
yeah.
find the
Which is pretty
time?
sweet. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know how
Yeah.
No,
how
that
long
that's
it's going to
that's
last, but
perfect.
it's
Because like,
lasted years now.
because if there's any
Yeah.
job like you want to be malleable to your kids, it's something that's creative. So that's pretty. It's pretty
hmm
nice to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
true.
when you
Yeah.
say so when you say you're writing and working on music, so you do obviously do other kinds of writing outside of music
Yeah,
then.
so I got my like shortly after the Cinnamon Phase was released, I went to graduate school for creative writing and fiction
hmm
at NYU, and then that somersaulted into that teaching job, which I did for 10 years. And that whole time I'm writing, so like mostly I was writing short stories, and then for most of that time post graduation, I was writing a book, which I'm it's amazing how long a book can take, especially a book like this, which is it's personal. I'm not going to get into the details of the book because that's not what we're here for. But it's a nonfiction book about my dad's mother, and
Oh,
um,
yeah.
and it's sort of like a cold case, unsolved mystery situation, and it's me pursuing this in a sort of investigative way.
hmm
Um, and so that's like today that's what I was doing today. I've been through multiple revisions of this manuscript, which has been done multiple times, and now I've just done a big edit of it with a professional editor in order to eventually hopefully publish it. So
Awesome.
I do that, and I have a second novel that I in the meantime somewhere along the way uh, wrote a draft of a fiction novel. So yeah, so that's all part of the deal too. So my creative
Yeah.
energy is always bifurcated in two directions between music and creative writing, but of course they're related
Yeah.
How often do you
Oh
find
yeah.
one influencing the other?
a lot. Like eh, eh, because because my music is highly personal, and it's pretty much always like very close to autobiographical. And my writing is both of these projects. my biggest projects, you could say the same about them. That like when I hit on a theme in one or the other that is really powerful or meaningful to me, I almost inevitably will end up doing it in the other medium in some other form. Like, for example, my book is about my dad's mother. I don't know if you guys have heard the song Dorothy.
I listened to
That's
that.
one of my newer releases.
Yeah, yeah, I did listen to
So
that one.
that's like the song, that's like the boiled down song version of the book that I'm writing. That's like a
Oh,
that's
Yeah,
like a
right.
song
interesting.
about my dad's mother, and it's about the process of me searching for her in all of these places that she was in, and sort of dancing with her ghosts is the lyric. Like, so
Mhm.
so that's a perfect example of how they end up overlapping.
Yeah, awesome.
That's really nice. I was wondering who that was because it sounded like a very motherly figure. So it's always about your dad's mother.
That one is, yeah. Dorothy is my dad's mom, yeah.
That's
Did
nice.
She
is
passed,
she
so
someone? Oh,
she left the family when he was 9, and then she passed away when he was 14 under mysterious
okay.
circumstances. So
Yeah.
so it's like it was the center of who he was in terms of like what
Mm.
Right.
his central wound was, that was Dorothy, his mom. So I
Yeah,
never knew
right.
her, you know, it was long before
Mm.
I was born, obviously. So I've
Yeah.
been trying to like get to know her as one of the things, and writing that song was um that was good for me. That was like that took it to a place that, you know, in all of the years and hours and years that I've spent writing into that book version of that, it was sort of amazing how much more, and how immediately working on that song cut to the emotional core
Yeah.
of sort of all of the feelings that I have about her at this point after spending so much time with her story and like the details of her tragedy, and
Mm.
yeah,
What does
that's
your
it.
dad? What does your dad think of it all? Like, have you
My
shared it?
dad is no
Shared it?
longer alive, you
Ah,
know, and I
cool.
don't think, yeah, he passed away. He passed away, you know, younger than he should have. He was
Mhm.
57. I was
Mhm.
25. So
Mhm.
it's a while ago now. I don't think I would be doing any of it if he were still alive.
Mhm.
I'm
Mm.
sure I wouldn't be. Like I wouldn't be writing a book about his wound if he were still alive. I only started
Mm.
it after he died. And I
Okay.
think it was more than anything, it was, or as much as trying to get to know Dorothy and understand that story and try and figure out the truth about what happened with her. It was also just a way for me to keep interacting with him in my
Mm.
mind or in my heart or whatever, you know, just to keep that dialogue alive, and to try and like find out, like to get to know him deeper after he was gone, by way of the thing that we like basically never could talk about, you know,
Mhm.
which was because he just, you know, it wasn't something that he would openly speak about.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
very beautiful that you're able to find your own form of closure through a form of music and writing something two things that you're passionate about. I hope that's
Yeah.
satisfying for you.
Yeah.
That's the idea. You know, I've there sometimes I like wrestle with a kind of self-consciousness about whether the you know, the closure that I'm supposedly seeking by digging up this story, which has been mostly locked away or buried, is a more appropriate continuation of the metaphor of digging up. Um, and because there are people for whom it's painful for it to come back up, you know, and so like I have to really sometimes work. I go back and forth for myself, like how much of my own catharsis that comes from doing this is like it's not necessarily that bringing it to light is is clearly painful for the people close to me that I'm talking to about it. Like for my mom and my sister, I know that it's also cathartic, and for my dad's brothers, I know that it's cathartic, but there's other people involved for whom it's tricky business because there are other people.
Mhm.
There's particularly one person in the family who's implicated as possibly being involved in her death, but was never
Mhm.
brought to account. Um, so yeah, it's just I've really had, like, when I started that project, the writing project, I started it like, okay, this is what I want to do because of my relationship with my dad, and it's a way to get into the thing that we could never talk about. And I know it's a really interesting story, and I'm just fresh out of graduate school with a creative writing and MFA, and I need something really interesting to write about. So all the pieces fell into place. But then along the way, I was like, hold on, this has real world stakes. There are people that could be traumatized by the experience of me digging this all up. But I
Mhm.
think in the case of the song, it's much purer. Like I don't have any of those conflicted feelings about the music. And I mean, music is so much more. It's like just direct to the veins. It doesn't have all of the like intellectual trappings
Mm.
that something like releasing a nonfiction book would have. It's so much more of a intangible, um, expressionistic or impressionistic medium. So that was
Mm.
actually really, to be able to make that song was really cathartic for me after all the process of of practicality and the hyper intellectualization of the whole process, and wringing my hands over who was going to be hurt or how to talk to various people. And yeah, so in that way, like, and the fact that you can make a song in a couple days instead of a couple of years, which is what the
Yeah.
book is taken, is certainly appealing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And and yeah, I think that's like the thing with music that I love is it's a very like, yeah, like you say, like pure like form of like expression, and being able to just sort of get out the things that you want to get out. And um
Do either of you guys make music?
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, we both do, yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Forgive me for not knowing more about you
No, no, no,
guys.
no, no, no
No,
worries. You're totally good.
no,
I would love to know more.
yeah. Well,
Oh, go on.
well, Rick and I mean, we collaborate a little bit, um, on music. We both make like hip hop. Um, I'm a producer, and I also do like a lot of dance music. Um, yeah. What about you,
Hmm.
Rick?
I particularly fell in love with music because I really like writing myself. I very much really like poems and getting
Hmm.
into the different forms of expression through that mixed with the sounds. Cause I don't know too much about actual producing and stuff because it seems very complicated to me. But being able to find myself through that and find the words for it's something that just it feels otherworldly to an extent because I feel like I'm unloading things that means so much to me, but it's coming into a 2-3 minute package that is meant for people to listen to over and over again, and it really helps recontextualize it in a way that doesn't hurt as much, and it's something I think is really
Mm-hmm.
really beautiful, and that's why I like albums as as an idea because you know songs might be too short. Well, you can have an album, and that can turn into something that's a whole endeavor, and I always just
Hmm.
find that really
Yeah,
nice.
that absolutely. That's like, one of the things I wanted to say was for me, the Cinnamon Phase was like one of the first ever albums that I listened to front to back, as an experience, because I first heard it around the time that I started getting into music in that sense. Um, and it like, yeah, and I just loved the
Which
sort
was
of the world.
how old were you, Zeke?
15.
Hmm.
And I, yeah, and so I feel like, yeah, like sort of what Rick was saying, about how albums can like create this whole like world, I guess. Like the Cinnamon Phase was like one of the first albums that sort of showed me that. and I just loved, like, I think I heard it at the right time, in
Mhm.
terms of growing up and like discovering myself. And I think a lot of those tracks, yeah, were really eye opening in terms of what is possible, like with the storytelling in music. And um,
Mm.
so yeah, yeah,
It's it's
absolutely
actually
was.
a it's actually a it's a real treat and an opportunity for me to get to talk to someone like you directly. I've had plenty of interactions on social media and stuff with fans who for whom it was really meaningful, that album,
Mm,
but never like an extended conversation.
mm-hmm,
It is it's definitely like more often than not the people for whom that album was really meaningful, they found it in their youth, whether it was around that age, 15, or going up into the early 20s, which is when I made
mm,
it. You know, I was 20, 21, 22 when I made that album. And of course, it's like, it's just about all of that. So directly,
yeah,
it's just swimming around and like young, just not
mm,
yet knowing who you are and potentially having gone through, you know, heartache and
mm-hmm.
ending one relationship, starting a new relationship, not knowing where you're going and all that.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but I've always wondered whether like there's also something like if there's something about the sound of it separate from the lyrics that like
Well,
that
I think
really resonates with in
yeah,
conjunction with the lyrics and with like being a young person and like because it's a bedroom album, you know,
yeah,
it's like it's not even
mm,
close to professional sounding. So like I've always wondered whether that's like part of its
uh,
magic or whether
I
it's like the lyrics just superseded
mm.
everything or
No, I think, like, speaking from a young person's perspective, so I'm 22 now, the same age, that you
Mhm.
said you were on the title track.
It's fitting. It's
um,
fitting.
yeah,
A
I
decade's way of time.
yeah, yeah, 100%. I feel that in my bones now. No,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
from a young person's perspective, I think the lo-fi sort of bedroom pop aesthetics, like sort of add to the appeal of the record. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of modern artists, like Clairo, that
Yep.
that have that aesthetic as like a purposeful part of their music. And
Mhm.
I think that the way the cinnamon phase sounds sort of taps into that same sort of niche, I guess, like
Mhm.
appeal,
Mhm.
that songs like Pretty Girl by Clairo sort of tap into.
I know that song.
That
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So I
Mhm.
definitely think, like, for me in my brain, yeah, like the cinnamon phases, yeah, it's in that same sort of like bubble of
Mm.
music.
Mhm.
And I definitely think the way it sounds is a big part of the appeal. That raw, just like youthful. Like, I don't know. I feel like if it was like if it did sound
Amateur.
professional,
I mean,
yeah,
to be honest, I was an amateur. I was like, it's just the sound of somebody trying to figure out what to do in
mm,
GarageBand with a couple of weird instruments around,
yeah,
you know, and some digital stuff and something to say, you
mm.
know.
And
And
so I
I
guess,
do think that appeals and I try it like I'm trying to like I'm still this is the room that I make music in, which is like
mm,
my it's my my wife's father. He's no longer alive either. It's his former work studio and it's just full of all kinds of crazy stuff. He was a journalist
mm,
for Radio Free Europe
Oh, that's
and
cool.
he was
yeah,
a
right,
political refugee from Bulgaria. So if you know the song Overflow the Borders, I know Zeke, you said you like that
yeah,
song.
I love that song. Yeah,
That's that's about him. And and this is his old studio and it's a crazy space. It's just full of books and all kinds of
mm,
archives that he held on to that you know we're not going to throw away, but they're still here.
mm,
So it's still very modest, and I can still absolutely like I'm still enough of an amateur, even though I started making music again, and I sort of updated my equipment by a few degrees. I'm using Logic Pro instead of GarageBand, which isn't a huge difference, but still, I know how to do more things now. So I can make songs that are higher production value now,
mm,
but I'm careful not to overdo it.
mm.
Right? And I'm curious, Zeke, since you're a producer, do you like intentionally ever like keep it below a certain level of shine?
It really depends what I'm doing, to be honest. So I do
Yeah.
like I work with a lot of singers, producing for them. And so
And so you have to
I
do
have
what they want, kind of.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends. So like if I'm working with like a singer that just has an absolutely gorgeous voice, I will want to make that sound as good as like possible, given my
Course, yeah.
setup. But then there are other
Yeah.
times where I do like if I'm like producing a certain genre, like for myself, or I will like intentionally like go for more of a lo-fi
Yep.
aesthetic, and there are a lot of like
Do you
really
ever,
good plugins.
when you
Sorry.
do stuff yourself, is it all instrumental, or do you ever sing or rap or?
No, I rap and sing occasionally. Are you familiar with the genre hyperpop?
Yeah.
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 So I sometimes do like sort of like hyperpop, like heavily auto-tuned stuff. And then
Mhm.
me and Rick I have a song together where we rap. And I also have a
Cool.
death metal project that I did through COVID.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
just a bit of everything, really.
Okay.
But
Have you
but
um have you ever this is a weird question, but like, have you ever tried to make a song that was similar to a song of mine? In the sense that, like, sort of like if the production value was something that sort of worked for you when you were younger, like when you were younger, did you ever have a period where, I mean, maybe I'm fishing here, but I'm curious, like, did you ever try to make music sort of in that vein when you
well,
were younger, or?
I wouldn't. Okay, it's like this is probably like I wouldn't say I've specifically tried to make music that sounds like you, but I have directly tried to
That's
sample
not
your
real. I
music.
worded that
Oh,
incorrectly. Oh,
yeah.
but that's an interesting.
But no,
No, that
I
you
have
sampled.
directly. I did once try to make a hip hop beat that sampled Flicker Wings. Um,
Ah, what part of it?
just the main melody.
With actually my
The
vocals, or
no, just
just the no, just the
yeah,
instrumental?
yeah,
How'd
yeah.
it go?
I mean, I was a pretty bad producer at the time. So it didn't
Do you
go too
still have
well.
it? I want to hear it.
No, unfortunately, I mean, I technically do, but I've upgraded my computer. And when I did that, all my old FL Studio files won't open anymore.
Okay, you were on FL Studio.
Yeah. So since I got a new computer, anything that I made before the new computer won't open.
I mean,
So
maybe you
sadly,
could
I
try to
don't.
find an
But
older FL version.
yeah.
One
But
day
yeah.
you're
So that
gonna
was.
want to hear all those. You will.
Yeah. I mean, I still have but yeah. Anyway, so that was something I tried to do once. Was
Well,
try
I'm honored.
try to
I'm honored.
sample Flicker Wings into a beat.
That's the
So
first time I've ever heard of somebody trying to sample me, so I'm honored.
yeah.
So
There are a few tattoos out there, which is a huge honor. Lyric tattoos.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's the first
That's
thing. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. But it's kind of crazy like these days what's possible with like just home studio, like Sufjan Stevens' new album was recorded entirely in his house.
Yep.
Which just blows my mind. I don't know if you've listened to it, but
I have Javelin, yeah.
yeah.
I
Yeah,
mean, that blows my mind. I mean, even before that, like Billie Eilish and Phineas won 8 Grammys with an album that they recorded in their bedroom, with her sitting cross-legged on the bed singing, like hugging a pillow and holding a microphone. So it is crazy. It's crazy. I've talked about this a lot and in a couple of other interviews I've done, but all of that I can track the beginning of that whole growth of that whole tree started right when I was making music. It was GarageBand and MySpace.
Mhm.
You guys, I don't even know if you know what MySpace is.
No, yeah,
because it's
Yeah.
like-
yeah.
No, wait,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Not that
okay.
young.
So it was like suddenly in 2000, I don't know exactly what year, I would say maybe 2003, which was like the year before I graduated and moved to Seattle and started making the Cinnamon Phase. It was like that happened in it was coinciding that GarageBand was on every Apple laptop, and of course, people with PCs they had Fruity. You could get I had Fruity Loops in college before I ever had GarageBand, but GarageBand was arguably more power. It was more powerful than the early Fruity Loops, and and more user friendly. And it was like the barrier to entry on GarageBand compared to the world of music making before that point was just like night and day, you know,
Mm.
like, and then the barrier to entry on releasing your music to the public when MySpace came out was also like night and day. And suddenly it was like you can make music in your bedroom with the most basic essential. You don't even need a microphone. You can use the microphone in your laptop. And and if you had something to say, if you like could play some shitty piano or play some shitty guitar, but if you had something to say, or if you had a keyboard or a synthesizer or whatever, suddenly you could actually make a song and upload it to MySpace and it could be live for people to listen to. Of course, people then have to
Mm.
find you. But it was suddenly it was like the traditional gates of like having music be on the internet for other people to hear were just like smashed down, from one year to the next. And
Mm.
then, and to then trace that forward to the example that I just gave of Billie Eilish winning 8 Grammys on an album that was recorded in their bedroom on Logic Pro, which is just GarageBand Plus. And of course, they had a record label. That's different than just putting it on MySpace. But still, it's like that whole lineage started then, and it was
Yeah.
completely different before that.
Mm. No, it's really like the history of DIY music is like pretty interesting. There's
How
Yeah, of course, DIY music existed in other forms before then, but like it was on a 4 track. It was
Mm.
a much more physical thing before that. And then it was like print, like burning CDs and handing them out, or before that, like having your vinyl and handing it out at shows or selling,
Mm.
like there was just, what we take for granted now, the whole digital distribution component of it. It was just
Mm.
there
Oh,
wasn't
I definitely
absolutely.
agree.
anything
It's like
remotely like that.
completely different. Like people say, like you could say music's in a worse place because of like in terms of industry, in terms of the market and everything. But in terms of just being creative and accessibility, it's kind
Mm.
of insane the scale at which where it's at right now. Like literally
Yeah.
anything you can put up can be considered music. Like yeah, well it's bad, whatever. That doesn't really matter. That's just opinion, really. Anyone
Mhm.
can make music on any device really nowadays, and that's something that I
Yeah.
think is like it's only gonna get better. You can make
There's this
almost any sound you can imagine
yeah,
on a computer.
there's this album that
Yeah.
came out in 2021 called To See the Next Part of the Dream by Parannoul. And that
I don't know
album,
that one.
it's like a shoegaze, like emo rock album. But it completely
Okay.
blows my mind because so when it came out, the artist was anonymous and people assumed it was a band. But then when the album blew up and the artist came out and he was a single guy, but not only was it a single person, but all the instruments, the guitar, drums, everything were all done completely via MIDI. Like he doesn't have any
Mhm.
instrumental talent of his own except piano. But it literally
Mhm.
sounds like an entire band. And like the guitar quality, because usually like MIDI guitar like's kind of shitty, and like even
Yeah.
these days it's like often still not great sounding. But yeah, but he somehow just created this entire like band sounding album like on MIDI.
Tell me the name of the artist again. I missed it.
Parannoul.
Just wanna look him up. How do you
P
spell
A
it?
Paranoul.
Yeah. 2 words. Oh, I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll
So
have to
this
check it out.
album, I sent it to one of my friends who's a professional music producer. And when he finished listening to it, he's like, this album frustrates the fuck out of me because I didn't know any of this stuff was possible via MIDI.
That's pretty sick.
Hmm.
The
Oh,
stuff that,
interesting.
and he recorded his vocals on a Galaxy S5, which is like 9 years old at this
Random
point.
ass phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he
But
Korean? It looks like there's
yeah,
Korean titles to all the
yeah,
songs. Okay.
yeah. He's Korean. Yeah. But anyway, that's just like an album for me that really stands out as being like just another leap forward. Recently in terms of what's possible with sort of
Yeah,
at
it's a
home
new. Now we
DIY.
have a whole new frontier with
Yeah.
yeah. They're just the as you're saying, the quality and accessibility, as you're saying, Rick, of digital or just a music production on all levels. You can just start doing it on your phone practically, and then it's on TikTok if you want it to be. You know, it's like, and now of course the hot topic is AI, which I don't really care to talk about that much,
Yeah.
but
I agree.
Yeah. I
you
agree.
know, like so far AI in music doesn't really interest me, and I'm sure at
Mm.
some point I'll be proven wrong. Someone will be like, what do you think of this? And I'll be like, this is fresh, and then they'll be like, it's AI,
Boom.
and I'll
Right.
be like,
Yeah.
oh shit, you know.
Yeah. So I have a
You know,
question. So Nightfalls, is that you under a pseudonym or is
I
that
was gonna.
someone
I wanted
else?
to ask that
yeah,
because I couldn't figure out who that was.
yeah, yeah. So it's I wanted it. I came up with that for a couple of reasons. One, I want to be able to make instrumental music in the future.
Hmm.
Um, and I knew that it should be, if I want to like release a whole album of instrumental music, that it shouldn't be under Black Bear because Black Bear is so definitively a lyric based thing,
Yeah.
that it wouldn't make sense. But I also knew that, as an artist who has a loyal but still in the grand scheme of things relatively small fan base, that the prospect of getting a following for a new side project with a different name that's not at all connected to Black Bear would be like starting from ground zero, basically.
Mm.
And so I just had this idea to start, because I actually started, like when I started making new music again, a lot of it was just instrumental. And I was like, maybe this is something else. And then some of it I started putting lyrics over, and I was like, no, this is for sure Black Bear. It's the voice is back. It's
Mm.
and then I made Black Bear Part Two, and then I just had this idea. Well, there's no rules. Why can't I just say that the producer of this track is this other artist's name, and then Black Bear is the artist who wrote it and
Mm.
is singing on it, and then in the future, and if you've seen, I've put a couple of instrumentals
Yep.
up on the Nightfalls page that are just
Hmm.
Nightfalls,
Yeah.
and so far they're just basically like slightly different instrumental versions of the Black Bear collaborations. So it's like the instrumental to, which is it? I think it's the instrumentals to Overflow the Borders and Black Bear Part Two, just
Mm.
slightly different.
Yeah.
Um, but in the future, I want to have stuff that's not that. That's like just a Nightfall song. There's
Yeah.
not a version with Black Bear singing on it.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Because
the
something
idea.
that got me quite excited looking at Nightfalls was that you listed Clams Casino in the
Oh yeah,
in
huge.
the yeah. I Clams
Yeah,
Casino is by far my biggest influence as a producer. I would say
really.
at least 50% of the music I've ever made has been trying to recreate the Clams Casino sound, to
I
varying
would.
degrees of
That's.
success.
I just got goosebumps because you're the only person I've ever spoken to that shares
Really?
that obsession. Yeah, because yeah, I would say like yeah, I would say that like if there's anybody that I could count like how many times I've consciously set out to do something like somebody
Mm.
else, he's for sure the most.
Yeah,
And
it's just like
and I'm sure you
yeah.
can't, I don't know if you can tell when you listen to my music. Maybe you can because
Mm.
you know his music, but like the texture, I'm always going for that kind of texture. Like I'm always looking for the kind of like fucked
Yeah.
up, stretched out version of a sound.
Mm. Yeah,
So
the main
yeah.
sort of connection when I read that, the main sort of connection I made between the stuff you've been doing recently and Clams Casino is like sort of that connection to nature. Um,
Yeah, that too.
like
Hmm.
I think that's for me that like where Clams influences me the most is just all the like the sounds in his music, like all the white noise and all the like birds and like stuff
Yep,
like that
yep.
just really grounds the music in this like earthly like earthly just place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's
It's an
like
atmosphere. I mean, it's
yeah,
an atmosphere. Yeah,
his song All I Need is my most listened to song
yeah,
of all time, I think. That's my
really.
favorite. And the hilarious thing about that instrumental is so gorgeous, and it's a Soldier Boy song.
Yeah, no.
Like
Well, and
it
I mean, do you have the same experience that most of the time when you listen to the version with the MC on it, you're like, oh
yeah.
no, oh no,
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah,
it's
no,
so
I
much
heard
better without.
I was like, why would Clams Casino like make that beat? And he's like, yeah, you know what this is missing? Soldier Boy.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
uh
Unfortunately, there's a bunch of the ones with like Bun B and like there's one exception. There's a couple of Vince Staples Clams
the Vince
Casino
Staples,
produced
yeah,
tracks, which are those are the exception.
mm,
Those are the exception where I
Summertime.
think it's better with Vince on
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
See, I like the only one I really like outside of the ones with Vince is I'm God.
Yeah.
I love Lil B's
But hey, okay, you
it,
like that with Lil B on it?
yeah.
Did you know it before though? Because that track
No.
existed for a long time
Uh
without him, I think.
no. It's the other way
That
around.
was like
It came out
that was my
it
favorite Clam song for
yeah,
years.
it
And
came out
then
in
only
2000.
recently.
Yeah. It came out in
Okay, go ahead.
2007. Sorry, yeah. So it came out in
Oh,
2007.
with
On
Lil B on
MySpace
it.
with Lil B on it. And
Okay,
then that's how
you're the
Clams, cause
superior
yeah.
Clams expert.
No, that's how Clams Casino's solo career got started because the beat was so heavenly,
Oh.
and Lil B's performance on it is obviously so whatever. It's controversial, I guess.
Hmm.
That people were practically begging for the instrumental version.
Oh,
And
that's so
that's
interesting. I didn't know that
yeah.
backstory.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's
So,
the first song of his I ever heard. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
just the instrumental. I only heard the Lil B version more recently.
Yeah. Like I say,
I
I
think it got put
personally,
out. I think he
yeah.
finally put it out like legally in the last couple of years, I think.
Yeah.
Like I think it's
So
out
it's
now. Yeah.
the instrumental one, yeah, only got put on Spotify a year or two ago because there were some issues with Imogen Heap,
Yeah.
clearing the sample.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah.
you
Anyway,
said you were
what?
you record in that room that you're in right now.
Yeah.
I was wondering like how much, if you said you described your album Cinnamon Phase as a bedroom album, how would you say your approach to music has really changed and grown over the last 20 years?
I mean, it's the thing is, I don't know if you know, Rick, but like there was a 15-year period where I didn't make any music at
Right.
all. So like the growth had happened, like it was there. I put out that album. I moved to Germany. I met my wife. I then went to graduate school, and then I taught at NYU for 10 years. And then we moved here, and only then did it sort of reopen the possibility because I had the
Mm,
space, living in New York in a one-bedroom apartment, there's nowhere to set up a little studio, and I was so busy with teaching and with working on my book and everything. So, but cut to now when I would say that when I came back to making music, I was excited for it to be different. I knew it would be, and I knew it had to be in terms of what I was singing about, in terms of all of the music that I've heard and been influenced by in the time since then. Like when I made that album, I had never heard Clams Casino because Clams Casino wasn't making music yet. He didn't,
mm,
well, no, he didn't. He didn't.
yeah.
So I made that before any of, like, there's so many influences that have come between then and now. And so of course it's going to be different. And I was like, okay, there's a couple things I want to do this time. I want I want like I want basic music theory, which I didn't have before, right? Just basic. So I like did some YouTube courses in basic music theory. I talked to my wife who knows basic music theory. So like, and I mean basic, like really just, entry
That's
level stuff.
that's crazy that you didn't
But it
know that
helped.
stuff.
It's all feel. Like that was just
Yeah.
all feel. I had a piano in my house growing up. I sang in the choir in high school. I played saxophone from like, fifth grade to ninth grade. So I was musical and I wrote rhymes, You know, I rapped in high school a bit and in college.
Mm.
So it was all there, and I listened. I was always obsessed with music, but I was never trained in any sort of official
There,
See,
there you
sense.
I
go.
think that's another thing about like music. Like like some people like get on like amateur artists for not following proper structure or um uh just like whatever's deemed like the status quo for what's a song needs to be. You
Mm.
don't technically need that if it hits your ears right and you like how it sounds, you can just put that out.
No, and it can honestly, it can mess your shit up. You know, like I listen to interviews with artists all the time where someone will be like, you just like won't believe it that someone like still doesn't know what chords they're playing, you know, and you're like, holy shit, he doesn't know what chords he's playing, you know, like,
Mm.
you know, like I'm not like a big Coldplay fan, but I happen to listen to an interview with Chris Martin on whichever Broken Record or whatever, and he's like, he said some shit like that, and he was like he still doesn't know what he's playing, like he couldn't tell you what the chords are,
Yes.
you know, and I'm like, in a way, I'm like, that is
That's
dope because I
that's
couldn't either. Most
that's
of the
v-
time,
yeah.
I couldn't tell you what chords I'm playing, you know?
That's very real. Very real of him
Yeah.
to
And
say
he does it on
that.
purpose, right? Like at a certain point, he realized that it was part of the sound.
Mm.
Is that he like there's a sort of there's an unusualness to whatever chords he finds that somebody who's musically trained probably would not find because their brain would be like, this isn't
Mm,
right. You don't go from this to that, right?
mm,
And so like there's a I was surprised to hear him say it because like when I listen to Coldplay, I don't think of it as out of bounds at all,
Right.
you know, or
yeah.
in terms of be like, oh, that's weird. Oh, that was a weird
Yeah.
horn change. Like
This is
that's not how
experimental
I
music
experience
here.
Coldplay.
Oh.
Yeah. But apparently to him, that's part of his process. And you know, or Cat Power. I listened to an interview recently, and she too, you know, she's like on the guitar, on the piano, she couldn't tell you what chord she's playing, you know.
Mm, yeah. It's really
So I'm into
interesting.
that.
Like,
I'm into that. Like, and like when I said, you know, I want basic music theory was like just, you know, like even enough. I mean, I could stand to learn more and I would still be an amateur, but like even enough to just like understand what it means to say this song is in this key and these are the notes that are in this key. You don't necessarily have to stay with them, but like that's what it
mm,
means. And um and then also just like training myself on Logic Pro to do things that I didn't know how to do previously when I made the
mm,
cinnamon phase. Like I did zero MIDI on the cinnamon phase. I didn't have a MIDI controller. I didn't know how to do it. It was all direct
mm,
input. So with this, now I'm doing MIDI stuff. I didn't know how to sample. I'm sampling stuff. Overflow the Borders has samples. And I love that because I've always loved samples. Like, I mean,
yeah.
Clams Casino again, like those like stretched out fuzzy samples.
The
I just adore that kind of
vocals,
thing. And I grew up on
the
hip hop
vocals and
and
clams, so good.
yeah, yeah. And you know, he uses this like I looked it up at some point years ago when I was really trying to like mimic him. That he at some point anyway, he used some like really simple program that just like stretches an MP3 out
Mm,
super wide
yeah,
so
right.
that you're just dealing with this like you know, like, and that he
Yeah.
samples from like a vocal that you would never be able to recognize. And that way he's
Mm,
able to sample from things, here he was anyway, able to sample from things that are completely unrecognizable so he doesn't have to worry about getting caught.
mm,
Imogen Heap aside. But yeah, it's like that. The way that he gets that texture is that he just like expands it out and zooms in and gets
mm.
these really juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I found really interesting with him is he said that most of his beats sample from the same Imogen Heap song as I'm God.
Most of them,
Yeah, he said
like
maybe not
all of
most,
his
but
other tracks.
maybe not most, but he said a big chunk either come from like a few of the same like Imogen Heap songs because he's a huge Imogen Heap fan. And I personally know
Really?
at least I personally know a bunch of them. I accidentally discovered a lot of them. Because when I was going through my phase of trying to mimic him, once I found out that he loves Imogen Heap, I just went through a ton of Imogen Heap songs and reversing them, to
Funny.
try and get some vocal chops.
Oh,
And
reversing.
through
Yeah.
and through doing that, I accidentally found a lot of his samples.
That's pretty cool.
Really? Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Like he has a song called Angels with Mac Miller. And I accidentally found the song
I
that he
know that
sampled
one.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I accidentally found the song that he sampled for that. Through that
But you're not
process of
gonna
trying
tell.
to.
You're not gonna tell.
I can't remember what it is now. But I ended up recreating the beat for some fun once I found out how he made the sample.
Oh, you got to at that point.
I was wondering, so obviously, as I said earlier, like I'm 22 now, and you were 22 when you made the cinnamon phase. I was wondering if you could
Yeah.
go back to yourself, during the time that you're making that album, with the knowledge that you have now. What would you say?
Mm.
Could be personal advice, could be musical advice, just whatever.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me think about it for a sec. I mean, I think it it would have to do the reason I sort of stutter step at the question is because it's like the idea of intervening with the process that was beginning to happen
Mm,
with a future me is sort of like
yeah.
a weird
Mm,
idea because it's like if a future me had come back and said like, don't worry, it's going to be cool, or keep doing what you're doing, then it's like Back to the Future. It would like fuck with the outcome. You'd
yeah.
be like, oh yeah, I'm the shit. All right. um, but
You'd have to bring back X-ray
if I
glasses.
think of it in a, yeah, there you go. If you think of it in a simpler sense, like in terms of like if I were standing somehow next to my 21, 22-year-old self, what would I say, like now? What would I say to them? It would be a kind of like a version of thank you for taking the time
Mm,
to figure some shit out at that juncture in your life, and to
yeah.
say you and I were so lucky that you had an opportunity that just sort of you made it. You made it. Like my friend and I, we we left college. We said we were obsessed with music. People, it was the wild, wild west of this sort of digital distribution and making your own music um, and even starting little record labels. And we started our own indie record label and we made this music and we put it out. And I was so grateful for the circumstances of the time conspiring to make that possible and to have a partner going through it with me. And we were very much on the same page and we were in the Pacific Northwest, which Rick, I understand is where you are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you a Washingtonian?
Yes, I am. I don't live near the Puget Sound anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Have you ever passed through?
So, I have
Oh, that's dope.
indeed.
That's
Yeah,
dope.
yeah. For sure, yeah. On my way to Chelan, right? Does that make
Yeah,
sense that I would have
right.
gone
Yeah,
through
it's right
Wenatchee
up,
on the way to Chelan?
right north. 20 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. So being in the Pacific Northwest, I'm sure you have some sense of the indie music scene in the Pacific Northwest in the late 90s and the early 2000s. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a really interesting time to be there, like Phil Elverum of the Microphones in Mount Erie was very active in Anacortes, and Carl Blau, if you know that name, and of course all the like Olympia and the Kill Rock Stars, and that there was all this interesting stuff happening that we were really into, like as we left college. Um, that was like the Microphones was in Mount Erie. That was like our shit. That was our favorite shit. And so going to Seattle to start your own indie label was like it was the exact version of us doing what we thought was the coolest thing that we could
No,
possibly do with our lives at that
that's a
moment.
beating heart. Like my mom was like talked about that era of music so
Yeah.
much, and like imagining like actually being a part of that. That's pretty damn cool.
Mm. That's awesome.
I mean, we were peripheral, of course, you know, like I never was in a studio with Phil, but
Hmm.
like I saw him a bunch of times at shows, like at tiny little shows. I mean, he still plays tiny shows, I think, but because he's
Yeah.
always kept it real in that way.
Mm.
Um, and he's somehow always kept it relatively small, except for when he married Michelle Williams and then they got divorced a year later. But that was a weird period for the microphone industry. Um, uh, but yeah, it was like for us that was we inserted ourselves into that circumstance, and we were peripheral, but we you know, we were surfing that wave a little bit, and we were doing reasonably well, and it was a time where like there was just enough general interest for that
Mm.
kind of a scene that like people just wanted to find their version of that scene. In Seattle, it was like it wasn't hard. Like everybody wanted to be connected to a scene like that because that's what was going on. And
Mm.
and so so I would just say, yeah, I would say to my younger self, you know, thank you, and you were really lucky to find yourself in that circumstance exactly when and where you did, because it did help us figure out some shit.
That's awesome.
And I came out of that. I came out of that. You know, I definitely came out of that a more self-realized person, like going through that process. And that was like, that was the it was the eve of everything that came to my life afterwards, because I then
Mm.
moved to Germany in like a surprising twist. Right after I released the Cinnamon Phase, I was like, I want to live abroad. And then I asked around to people I knew who might be able to help with that. And a family friend of ours was the head of school at the Munich International School, which is where my wife is teaching now. And you've maybe heard this story somewhere else or read it, but I asked her if she had any jobs that I could apply for with my bachelor's in studio art, which was what I graduated with. And she said, "Yeah, we need another assistant kindergarten teacher, and we love having males in the junior school because almost all the teachers are females." And I was like, "Yeah, give me an interview. I want to do it." And so within a couple of months after releasing the Cinnamon Phase, for reasons unrelated to the Cinnamon Phase, I was on my way to Germany to do this other thing. And
That's
then I met my
crazy.
wife, and like that's like the fork in the road moment of my entire life.
Mm.
And I'm not attributing it to the Cinnamon Phase, but somehow that process of going through that, it released me from whatever cycles I may have been sort of churning around in my early 20s, post college years, of like, where am I going to be in the world? What do I want to do? I still have heartache about my college girlfriend that I broke up with. We broke up like right after I moved to Seattle. We broke up. She was a Seattleite,
Is that
still is.
Jamie?
No, Jamie was the girl
Oh.
that I got into a relationship with after, who um who yeah, so I got into a relationship with Jamie about like halfway through the process of the Cinnamon Phase, or maybe a little bit later
Right.
than halfway through.
Hmm.
And I met her on MySpace. She was another bedroom musician that I met on
There you go.
MySpace. And so certain
Cool.
songs like later in the album, like Flicker Wings and Eve of the Fall, are both
Mm.
Jamie songs, whereas all of the like previous more heartachy breakup-y songs are my college girlfriend,
Yeah. I
who I was with all through college, and then like I moved to Seattle to be with my buddies and start this record label, but also because
Mm.
she had graduated a year ahead of me, and she had already moved back to Seattle. So
Mm.
it was like we had done a year of long distance, and then it was like we're finally going to be together again. And we got there, and it was like this doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Right.
And And so that album was born out of the ashes of that sort of heartache. And like, it was this mixture of like, this is fucking cool. We're out here, we have our own house, like, we're making friends, we're making music. But at the same time, like, I have this heartache from the end of this relationship and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with my life. And so it was like
Mm.
it was a full, it was a
Yeah.
really exciting time with a ton of emotions and too much coffee. And, and,
Yeah.
yeah, it was that cinnamon phase was born out of all of that.
And so I guess leading on from that, I was wondering, what's it like? You know, obviously most artists release their debut album and then the sophomore album follows 2 or 3 years later, and it like just captures that growth in just like, you know, those short few years. What's it like to have your first album be when you were sort of figuring your shit out and just still working out your life, and then to have your second album come so much later when at least it sounds like you're really established and um in a completely different spot in your life?
Yeah, it's a great question and one that's, you know, probably unique, a question that you can only ask of a few artists because it is such an unusual case. It was at first it was this sort of like thing that I would intellectualize and be like, okay, so there's an existing fan base for Black Bear and the Cinnamon Face songs, and I would be stupid to not sort of continue and build upon that after this
Mm.
sort of return with this sort of return that I wanted to make. But I know that I'm not going to pretend to be a 20 something singing about, you know, singing about my 20 something things.
Mm.
So of course it's gonna have to be, the content of it is gonna be different. But then once I got into writing the songs, it was like, yeah, the content's totally different, but the voice is still, it's a continuation, you know,
Mm.
like it's a voice. I don't think a voice changes that much over the course of a life. Like, even though what you say changes a lot over the course of a life, I don't think the voice does.
Mm.
And so that was something I started figuring out. And I knew that voice was an important part, and the way that I said the things that I did with the cinnamon phase and when I was that age mattered as well. It wasn't just what I was talking about. And so I had to go into this saying to myself, like, you know what, like, even though there's a big portion of your audience that are much younger, um, first of all, don't be afraid to hopefully make you know, new demographic corners of your audience that aren't all younger, which I hope I've done. I'm happy to have all ages, of course, but also to trust the fact that the people who love the cinnamon phase, either they've discovered it recently or they discovered it, you know, like you, Zeke, when you were 15, but it was already out for a bit, and and you know you're still in your early 20s. Like, trust that because of the voice and the sort of like the thing I'm trying to do most when I make music is just to be like as as much me as I possibly can, you know, and I don't mean
Mhm.
that in like I don't mean that in a way that's like it's not it's not arrogant. At least I don't think so. It's not like conceited, like I'm so cool, I'm just trying to be me. It's just like I know that that's the thing that works both for me and seems to have worked for the people who love the cinnamon phase because that's what I was doing then.
Mm.
And so now in this new phase, that means that I'm talking about things like my dad's mother and my wife's father and being a parent. And though I haven't released, let's see, no, I don't think I haven't released any songs yet that that like refer to me being a parent, but I have a couple because it's the forefront of what, you know, and like now I'm using my voice to talk about the things that are in my life now,
Mm.
which, you know, may not interest people as much as, you know, the Black Bear. I just I've pretty much accepted that Black Bear the song I'm never gonna reach the
Banger.
heights of. I'm never going to reach the heights in terms of how many people that's reached and how many people listen to it every day. Like it's not, I'm not really, I mean, sometimes I fantasize about having another song
I mean,
that has
I
that kind of reach, but I'm
I would
okay
never
with the fact that
never
I
say
have
never.
one. Like I'm grateful that I
Yeah.
have one, you know?
Yeah.
What were you saying,
Yeah.
Z?
I was saying never say never.
Yeah. I shouldn't never say
Yeah.
ever. But more importantly, it's like I know that it's not about that. Like it's not necessarily about the number of plays. Obviously, the number of plays represents how much you're connecting with people, which is the more important
Mm,
thing, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Uh,
like I do watch my plays. I check up on things, and there are times I'm like,
mm,
oh, damn. Okay. Yeah, like, if something doesn't catch, but it's also like if you're not doing any promo, and I hardly do any promo, and I'm like I'm not particularly active on social media. I don't TikTok things. I don't. So it's like, yeah, I'm just
mm,
counting on pre-existing Black Bear fans or like some sort of algorithm or word of mouth, which was
mm.
I think word of mouth was the magic thing with the Cinnamon Phase and with the song Black Bear, is that people would just be
Yeah.
like, you got to hear this, and play it for
Mm,
somebody else and for somebody else and for somebody
yeah.
else.
I was actually listening. My parents were out. They were sitting on the deck the other day, listening to music, and Black Bear came on. And I'm like,
Mm,
damn, like I didn't even know that my parents had like sort of picked it up and listened to it now, which is
that's cool.
funny.
That's
Uh,
really cool.
but yeah, no, I definitely, yeah, that song is. I think it's just one of those songs. The lyrics just speak. Um, like I'm 7 years older than I was when I first heard it, but it's still its meaning and the way that it hits me hasn't changed. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
do you
I don't
have
know.
do you?
It's one of those things when you have a song like that, you like it makes sense to think about it and to try and like break down
Mm,
what it might be. But then there's this certain thing that you just can't
it's
recreate.
yeah. There's
Like
just this
sometimes you just cannot
ineffable,
recreate.
yeah. Yeah, I always think about music as like a specific song as like a moment in time. Like like when you're recording yourself in that moment, it's like that is a moment that you've just captured through your microphone, and that's gone, and that's never
Yeah,
even a minute later, like it's gone. And
absolutely.
that's how I think about all of my songs, at least. Um,
Yeah, and
but so
it's so easy to miss the moment, right? Or
mm,
like, I mean, Rick, you were talking about this before too, like that, like when you put something down on record, not physically record, but like when you record it,
Mhm.
that suddenly it's like it brings it outside of you, whatever feeling, whatever thing you were trying to express, and there's different ways of doing that. Like there's people for whom like belting it out live in front of an audience of people is the most cathartic way to deal with
mm,
it. And then there's other people like myself and maybe more like you guys that like I don't feel a need to go do that. Like it's
Mhm.
for me,
mm,
like the idea of catharsis isn't like I need an audience, I need eyes on me, I need to be in a room physically singing this thing to people. It's like the thing that I want most is to record it into a microphone and have it be
mm.
locked into a recorded
Yeah,
version.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Do you get that?
Yeah.
100%. I mean,
And
I've
that like and of course it's like it's not just the first time, it's like you're looking for that version of it that hits, and it's because we love recorded music so much and we've been spoken to by recorded music so much. And it's the same thing like when you go to a live show and then you hear like the live version of a song, or like I heard somebody Rick Rubin and Rosalia were talking to each other on Rick Rubin's new podcast, and he was like, "Do you have a live band for your new tour?" And she was like, "No." And he was like, "Good."
Mm,
Because so often with pop music and with hip hop music, people think you're supposed to have a live band, but it's distracting because it doesn't
it
sound as
sounds
good as the
different.
recording.
Mhm.
And it sounds
Absolutely.
different. Yeah.
Yeah.
and we fall in love with the recordings, and it's like there's certain types of music where you're like, oh hell yeah, give it to me live, give me the band, I want the vibe, I want the full feel, you know. But
Mm,
then if you go see like Vince Staples, you don't want a band
mm,
to be trying to play those beats, you know,
mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
or Rosalia. I
Also,
mean, Rosalia could be an exception, but in terms of
yeah.
this album, Motomami, which
Mm,
was the one she was touring, it's like, no, you don't want a
mm.
band trying to play those crazy
Absolutely.
productions.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think the
Um.
recorded version to me is more cathartic. Rick, do you agree?
So when I was in middle school, I started writing poems for the first time. But I was just like really learning how to rhyme and stuff, and just figuring that out. And that's when that slowly grew into an artistic identity, and that's turned into trying to be as structured with songs and stuff. And then forever it was just a fantasy of like, oh, what could this even sound like? I wasn't even concerned with like the sound of it. I just wanted to write it down. And then COVID happened, and I had so much extra time. I finally was able to record music. I wasn't too much of a fan of it. I like just in terms of like what I felt at the time and what I was I was able to express. I wasn't satisfied. A couple years later, and I'm making music that
it's crazy to have something that's tangible, and I think that's a song, and
Mm,
it's something it's so much different than writing it down. I write down music, I songs as like almost like a journal, to be honest. However that might manifest itself, and yeah, I agree. Like the actual recording of it is it's yeah, like you said, it locks the memory into a specific place. You can analyze it, you can learn from it, and there's nothing
mm,
else that can cloud it. It's one thing. Like the MP3 file is not going to change in 10 years.
mm.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I'm really.
yeah. There's something about that moment. Yeah, and I listen to my music. You know, like a lot of artists would say they don't, but like as someone who's not a touring musician, also, it's like I don't have I don't have that like nightly experience with my own music where I'm playing it on stage the way a lot of musicians do, right?
Mm,
So for me, like if I want to keep having an ongoing relationship with the songs that I've recorded, like of course I'm gonna listen to them, you know?
yeah.
Of course.
I listen to my
Otherwise
music
they're
all the
like,
time.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Um.
yeah,
But before you go, before I go, I have to ask. So I feel like my favorite artist of all time is Sufjan Stevens.
Okay.
And I actually got into him through your music, through the algorithm. But
Oh, interesting.
yeah, just fun little fact. But anyway, I was wondering, so you'd be influenced by him, through your music, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. What's your favorite
yeah.
Sufjan record?
Okay, so for my era, all of us started with Michigan.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was you know, it, it was before the whole like discussion about is he going to do all 50 states? I don't know if you remember that whole thing. It was like
Yeah. With
Michigan, and
Illinois.
then there was Illinois, and then he
Yeah.
did like this thing about the BQE in New York, and
Yeah.
but for me, originally it was Michigan. If you were to ask me now, I don't listen to Michigan much anymore.
Mm.
I don't think
I
I probably
that's
I listen to Carrie and Lowell more than I listen to Michigan.
mm,
I'm getting into this new one.
yeah. Javelin has quickly become. I would say Javelin could be his best record, in my opinion.
You think so?
There's just like it's one of those albums where every single song grabs me. Like, so Carrie and Lowell is my favorite album of all time. But even with that, I still feel like there's 2 or 3 songs on Carrie and Lowell that sort of just blend into the track listing a little bit. Like Drawn to the Blood, Eugene, a few songs that don't necessarily stick with me as much as others. Whereas for me with Javelin, every single song like sticks out, and every single song has carved out its own space in the record where I don't like, none of them blend into the track listing. I don't
Okay.
get 7 songs deep and then realize I didn't pay attention to a song like I do sometimes with Carrie and Lowell or Illinois or Age of Odds.
Yeah.
But yeah. anyway,
Well, I'm
I
gonna dig back in tomorrow or even tonight, based
yeah,
on
I
that strong recommendation.
yeah, I just, and plus, for me as well, one of the things I've found difficult with Sufjan is the fact that all of his writing is pretty much buried in metaphors and stuff, and so I enjoy the fact that
Less
Javelin
so on Carrie
songwriting.
and Lowell. That's probably why you.
Yeah,
That's probably why you like Carrie and Lowell. It's the least,
yeah,
I
but
think.
even then, like on like the only thing, like he references like Greek mythology and stuff like that, which like I think it's cool. But what I love about Javelin is like it's literally just so straightforward. Like it's obviously breakup music. Like it's obviously like about this. Like I think it's
Heartache.
the most
Yeah, it's weird. It's deep. It's deep.
direct and straightforward that he said. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah.
Before I go, I
No,
just
don't
wanted
be
to talk
sorry.
about yeah. I just wanted to talk about Sufjan for a little bit because he's my goat. He's my favorite artist of all time.
Yeah, it's kind of a good reminder for music because I think that sometimes when I sort of think about who my influences are, I forget how much it has influenced me. Probably a lot of it subconsciously, but
Mm.
I mean, if you were to make a connection between my music and his, like, what's the connection that you make?
Well, for me personally, first of all, the general, like it's got that mid 2000s like indie feel. I'd say in common.
Mhm.
And then second of all, I think the singing style somewhat is similar to
Yeah.
me.
That's what I was
And
gonna
then
say. It was like
yeah,
singing style, like the vulnerability of the singing
mm,
style, and
yeah,
arguably my newer stuff might feel more some of it,
mm,
and some of it you guys haven't heard yet because I haven't released it yet. But I have a number of songs where my vocal performance is much more like right in the microphone, not with
mm,
vocal doubling like I often do. It's
yeah,
like slower. There's more sparse. I mean, Dorothy's kind of like that with more sparse
mm,
production around it, and you can really hear the vulnerability of the voice. And I think
mm.
that is influenced by Sufjan.
And then my last question is, do you have a title for the upcoming album?
My God, I had a vision that you were going to ask me that question, which is It's hilarious. Um, I don't. It's not set, so I'm not going to say it out loud in case it's not
Okay.
it.
Okay.
And the origin of it is in a song that I haven't released yet.
So you're
The
not.
short answer is yes, I think I do, and
Yeah.
the disappointing answer is I think I'm gonna hold it
That's
close to my chest.
that's
It's
fine.
really
That's fine. The main thing I was looking for was whether or not you were gonna continue like whatever's up, like continue with the like whatever the next
the phase.
color, the black.
No,
No, you're not
no, it
continuing with
would
that.
be
No.
the next. I considered that possibility, but it would
Yeah.
be the black phase, which
Yeah.
just doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
From me, coming from
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just and it, I want to be able to, like, creating Night Falls was also a way of me being sort of like opening the door of possibilities to say, like, the music that I make in the future doesn't all need to be rooted back in this place of Black Bear the Cinnamon phase. So similarly, even though I thought about, like, oh, it would make sense to call this the black phase or to somehow connect it to that phase idea, every time I actually consider it, I like it
Yeah.
totally turns me
It's
off, and
it's
I'm like,
it's a
no, that's
little
not
bit
right.
too.
It doesn't fit.
Yeah. It's a little bit too obvious, I think, as well.
It is. It
Yeah.
is, and it's not appropriate because it's such a
Mm.
different phase. It's such a
Yeah.
different phase for me.
Yeah. Different era.
Um,
Yeah.
I had one last question. One thing I
Yep.
like when it comes to listening to artists and their lyrics is like if when you can tell someone actually cares about like what they're writing down, and not that there's anything wrong with like having fun with it. It's just I just find it more fun to listen to lyrics that you can tell a lot of thought behind it, a lot of history. And one thing I also like is quirks in what one may do. I find in your music you reference very specific locations very often, and it like brings me to the place in almost
mm,
a first person perspective. And
Mm.
I want to
yeah.
ask like what inspires like that decision, because it seems very frequent, and it's not just a one-off.
For sure. For sure. I love using place names. I love using cultural references. I didn't use that many cultural references on the cinnamon phase, if any, but like in a lot of my new stuff I do, like whether it's a movie or a book or something like that, or like, but place names always, I've always been into place names as someone, as a listener of music. I love place names. They just, because for me, sense of place is just like,
Mm.
it's one of the most immediately evocative things. And also places have cool names.
Yeah.
You know, like
I've always
place, like
yeah.
like Wenatchee, you know, like you could write a song about Wenatchee, maybe you have.
Yeah.
Like it's such a, you know, there's so many great songs that have place names in them, and it doesn't matter if I've been there or not,
yeah.
you know?
I've always
Like because if you just feel that the person has an association with that place, then it
Yeah,
signifies.
it can
It means
reference something.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I've
And
always
specificity, like it's just specificity, and poetry too. It's like you it's specificity gives way to universality because we all have specific experiences.
Oh yeah, I love
Mm.
that. Yes.
I've always been fascinated by the Australia Olympia Poughkeepsie. One because
Uh-huh.
I'm Australian,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
B it's just such an
right.
interesting. And also just because that song just hits, and like I would not click a song titled that and then expect to be crying to the lyric. The oh fuck, I had it in my mind, and it's just got the
But
the
yeah,
singing,
I'm
the
sick
singing
and I'm sad
alone.
and I shouldn't be
Yeah,
singing because I don't have
yeah,
anyone to talk to.
yeah, because
Yeah.
I love that song, and even
I've
just
got no one to talk to. Yeah.
the awkward conversation recounted at the beginning between the ex girlfriends.
Yeah. The
And that, like, I love that. And also another song that I'll just on the topic that of that on the album that really got me through a breakup was In the Arboretum.
mm-hmm.
But specifically the I don't really want her back, it's just the effects of grieving. Like, I had a
Yeah.
girlfriend where we broke up, and I realized I didn't miss her. I missed the comfort and the warmth of a relationship. And I realized if we were to get back together, it wouldn't be good. And that song
That
was,
makes that's
yeah,
one of the most gratifying things I've ever heard, that
yeah,
directly, because that's exactly what that was. That's exactly
yeah,
what it was. It was like me telling myself that thing. It was like there was an earlier demo version of that song that didn't have that in it.
yeah,
And
no,
then it was like a year later or whatever, X number of months later, when I'm like thinking about, okay, which songs are going on to my album, and I'm listening to that song and I'm like, you know what? It sounds like I really want her back, but I don't.
mm,
Like,
yeah,
but like,
no,
and even then, I think I knew that we shouldn't get back together. And
mm,
so I added that almost as like a postscript.
yeah, no,
And I knew that it was important to me to do that. And
that
it's
one,
actually
yeah,
amazing to me that it was important to you.
no,
And about
yeah,
Australia Olympia Poughkeepsie, that same girlfriend, she went to Melbourne for her junior year semester abroad. And
yeah,
I visited her there for 2 weeks. That's the only time I've been to Australia. And we had a great time. It was this particularly special bonding time for us. So and then Olympia, we lived in Olympia for part of a summer once during college, Olympia, Washington.
Oh yeah.
And then
Nice.
Poughkeepsie is where we went to college. So we
yeah,
went to Vassar College in Poughkeepsie, New York. So that's those three
yeah,
places.
right. Yeah, I sort of figured out like how Poughkeepsie and Olympia was significant, as in obviously not the specific details, but sort of I was like, oh, I can see how those places could have been in your life. But I was so
Yeah.
fascinated by Australia. Just to me, felt so.
It comes out of nowhere with zero
Yeah,
explanation. It's true.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
funny how
and again,
that's what I'm saying. It's like it signifies, and you're like, well, Australia, I have no idea why it's here, but it means something to him,
yeah,
to
and
them.
I literally
And
remember
so
when I
it has
first,
power.
yeah, I literally remember when I first got into it was because a girl I was talking to at the time told me to listen to Black Bear, the other Black Bear, um,
Yeah.
and I found your
Oh, the
music,
other
and
one.
yeah,
Oh, I think I
uh,
remember you telling me this when you
and
reached out to me
yeah,
early on.
And I remember saying she was like, "Oh, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, like Australia Olympia Poughkeepsie's my favorite." And she was like, "What? What? What do you like? Why he does
She
not
was
have a
like,
song
"No, I
called
mean
that?"
that one where he's like, fuck you and you and you and you."
Yeah. And she's like, "Yeah, he does not have a song called that." And I'm like, "Well, he does. I'm literally listening to it right now." And then I sent her a screenshot of what I was listening to. And we realized I'd clicked the wrong artist.
That's funny.
And
So amazing. What an
yeah,
amazing way.
yeah. And then I was like,
I'm sure you're not the only person who found me that way.
yeah. And I literally remember,
because even
yeah.
though I really can't stand most of his music, and
yeah,
I'm sort of like,
it's pretty bad. I
Yeah.
don't like it.
It's
But
popular.
and I just remember saying to her, like, "I'm sorry, your music's gonna have to wait because this album's good, and I'm gonna listen to the whole thing."
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I actually
So
do
cool.
have to go now. But thank you so
All right.
much for
Thank
chatting.
you so much,
It's
guys. This was a real
been
pleasure.
really awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so
No,
much for
seriously,
coming
this
on.
was really this is really
yeah.
nice.
After being such a fan of your music for so many years, it's really cool to be able to chat. So thank you.
Likewise. And thanks so much for the invitation. And Rick, it was great to meet you as well.
No,
and,
yeah, likewise.
And I wish you guys the best of luck. I want to hear your music, so you got to send me
Yeah,
some links.
I'll send you the song I did recently that was like very Clams Casino influenced. Because I think you'll
Awesome.
Like that one.
Awesome. Yeah. And I'll send you guys a couple of sneak previews to unreleased stuff from the.
I always love that. Always love the.
Oh yeah, love it. Yeah.
Sneak peeks. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
All right. Have a good night.
See ya.
Peace out.
All right. Have a good rest of your
you
day.
guys for listening.
Yeah.
Neighborhood Radio.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Yeah. Thanks for anybody who's listening. There are people listening. Awesome.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Yeah.
All right, peace.